Tim Petrowich here for Dateline Marion, and it's that time of year again. We're here getting ready for week one of the 2017 high school football season. Our guest is head coach Kerry Martin, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started. It's hard to believe it's here already.
Yep, it's an exciting time of year. It comes fast and it goes fast, and it's game week, and we're excited to get things going.
Normally, we talk a little bit about last week's game, but because this is week one, we kind of do things a little bit differently. So I want to kind of talk about this year's team and reflect a little bit on who you've got coming back last year. And I know there's two names in particular that are going to stand out. One of them is it's nice to have a guy who every time he touches the ball is a threat to score. And Jaden Lacey is that kind of player, and it seems like after watching the scrimmage last week and seeing a few things, Jaden seems to be playing a lot harder this year than he did last year.
He's had a good camp, and certainly Jaden has been playing a lot since his sophomore year and been an impact player since his sophomore year. So he's always had to keep kind of moving up that ladder of success, and he's improved in his game a lot. I thought his effort tonight was outstanding. I think the biggest thing I've noticed in the change in Jaden is his blocking ability, which is, just continued to improve. Was better last year than the year before, and this year even better. So he's communicating with his teammates well on the field. He's a good leader. He's a good example on the field for him, and so we're proud of where he's gotten so far as a player. And sometimes when a player has success, sometimes they kind of just pull back and just think I've arrived. But Jaden has continued to work hard and has had a really good 2 or 3 weeks of camp.
How much of that is maturity? Because you see that a lot, especially between junior and senior year, because once you're a senior, you're one of those guys who have to step up and be a leader.
Well, and we don't have very many seniors anyway, so the fact that the seniors we've got have got to be leaders, and I've got to get leadership out of those guys, and he certainly has been that for me on the field so far the last few weeks.
Caden Hilliard at the running back spot. We talked about the improvement he made, a dramatic improvement in the last couple of weeks of the season last year.
He did.
And it's just all mindset thing of not trying to be in too big of a hurry to do things, but let things develop.
Yeah, that just takes, as you said the word earlier, maturity and patience and experience, and he's always had the tools. He's another guy that's really been a great leader for me on the field every day, and coaching the other guys that aren't in his position group. He's constantly encouraging, he's constantly correcting if they need to be corrected or told, hey, do it this way, this is a better way, make sure you do this, don't forget that. So I'm pretty proud of him too, because he's come a long way in that area and become a really more complete football player. So we look forward to him getting a lot of carries this year.
The next familiar name is going to be your quarterback, David Fletcher. And David didn't play a whole lot last year, but he did get some minutes in, and he's another one that you said has had a really good offseason and really improved between last year and this year.
He probably has the most dramatic improvement of anybody on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, he was our kicker last year, our backup quarterback, but he has really come a long way. He's managing the offense. He's throwing the ball well. He's got a nice deep throw. He's very, very smart and understands the big picture of the game. Just doesn't understand his position, understands the big picture. And that's important as a quarterback, because they've got to see that pre-snap. They got to see that after the snap, and he does that really well. I see him making adjustments before the ball snapped with the running back alignment of the receivers, and he spots things a lot of times that maybe I missed, that maybe I called wrong. If I set the wrong formation for that play in, David's able to fix that for me and make me look smarter. So it does a good job of that.
Go to the other side of the ball, and a name that a lot of people have heard the last couple of years and they're going to hear again this year, and that's Terrell Henderson.
Yeah.
And he's one of those players that disrupts a play pretty much every time on the field.
Yeah, he's really grown into a very good defensive lineman. I tell you, one of the best things about Terrell for us is we have to go against him every day, and I think he's making our offensive linemen better because they have to deal with him every day, and we've had to learn to scheme him a little bit to be successful against him, and I think that's going to help us against really good defensive lines. And so we always ask the kids, your legacy is really not based on what you do, but how much better you make your team. And some great players never make their teams better. And what I like is to see a player be able to make his teammates better, to make his team better by his performance, not only in practice but also in games and in their work ethic in the weight room or in the training time. So we're going to have a lot of that this year from this group. We have a small group of seniors, as I mentioned, and so the leadership's going to fall on about 10 guys pretty heavily.
And I got to ask this question because when you talk about a disruptive defensive lineman, the one that comes to mind in recent memory is Aaron Adeyewale.
Sure.
How does Terrell compare to Adeyewale as far as that type of a player?
There are some similarities between the two. I think we've made that comparison ourselves on occasion, that there are some similarities. Aaron was kind of a longer player and oftentimes played inside, where Terrell is almost always on the edge. But there are times where they remind me of the same type of impact player. They can get off the ball and penetrate and get inside a lineman, or they can run something down from behind that you think we can get around and you can't, because if you don't sustain a block on them, they're going to be difficult to get off. So there's some similarities. We've made that comparison ourselves.
Now, one of the trademarks of Marion football year in and year out, and we've talked, especially on the offensive side, we've talked about players like Jaden Lacey and Caden Hilliard, but every time people gear up for them, there's always someone else. And
Sure.
it's not the same person, but someone else week in and week out that steps up and has an impact game for you. Who are some of those players this year?
Well, we've got Dylan Cannell will play a receiver for us, and I think Dylan's going to surprise some people. He's a very, very good receiver. Clayton Bastion stepping up as a starter on the offensive side. And he played some tight end last year, some running back last year, but very few of our players in our program have improved as much as he has from sophomore to senior year. I think Cade Cruz and Wyatt Fox are playing some tight end for us. We have some guys in our tight set, like Peyton Barnett, I think could be an impact player. Rico Williams is a move in from Chicago, and he's really fit into well to what we're doing. You'll see him at running back some, you'll see him on defense. So he's been a nice addition to our team. So there's a number of guys I think will have an impact. I think Drake Rabat's a young sophomore player that we're impressed by what we're seeing. James Gunn moved here from Carterville, was a player for the Lions, and he's now playing some nose guard for us. Justin Lambeau, we call him Justin Lambert. Justin Lambert is an offensive defensive lineman that I think can be special in the next couple of years. Quentin Patterson played some offense and defense last year. He'll be opposite Terrell. And boy, he's 100 mile an hour every snap, gives you everything he's got. I look for good things out of him. So, there's a lot of names I threw out there, and you made a great point. I think the reason we've had some consistent success over the years is not because we've had elite players every year. It's because of those guys, like the guys I just mentioned, that maybe someone didn't hear of last year that steps up this year and is a player for us.
It's not just that they didn't hear of last year, but they didn't hear of last week. You see that so many times. Last week he didn't really do anything, and then this week he's making a big impact in the game.
Yeah, and this team is no different. I mean, we've got to have contributions from Jaden and Caden, David, and Terrell, absolutely. But it's that supporting cast that's going to make us a really good football team. Because in this sport, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys can't do it. It takes 11. It literally takes 11 every snap. And I look for guys like Brennan Pecord and Michael Cantrell, our 2 starting offensive linemen that are returning from last year, to have big years for us. Those guys leading that offensive line and making a difference, I think, will be a big part of it.
Another thing that historically over the last few years Marion has done is played really fast. And I don't mean fast with players, and you had some fast players, but I mean you like to get up and run plays and run plays and run plays.
Yes, sir.
Anything different about that this year?
No, it's who we are. I mean, you're not going to come to a game and see something different, and we are who we are. We have our spread set, we have our tight set, which I hear from people all the time. I like that tight set better. I like that spread set. So we try to appease everybody, right? We have a little bit of everything, and then
I don't think that's the way you really do it. But anyway,
we have some offensive wrinkles. Maybe we're going to lean on some stuff. We're going to do more this year than we have in the past, because I think every team has its own identity or personality based on the skill sets of their kids, and so we're tweaking everything we do every year. But the base sets themselves and the ideology, I think the philosophy of playing up tempo and doing those things and throwing the screen game and getting up and down the field as quick as we can. Really focusing hard on our special teams game, which I think with David kicking could be really good aspect of our team. So we are kind of who we are. We're just making some changes to adjust to our talent level a little bit.
We've talked quite a bit about offense and mentioned a lot of players. Defensively, you said you're a little bit younger than you've been in the past, and you don't have the familiar names on that defensive side like the Tommy Wilsons and the Chancellors and things like that. But some young talented players are coming up on that defensive side.
Yeah, we're not. The biggest thing is just as a coach, you worry about that experience level, and there's not a lot of game experience over there, but there are some guys that have played back there. Jaden's played some defense, and Terrell and Quentin Patterson and others, but we don't have that 6 or 7 guys back on defense that played a lot of snaps in a lot of games last year. We're a pretty young football team to begin with, and we're really young on defense. But Coach Dunning and Coach Wimberly and Coach Warner have done a great job of getting these guys ready, making sure we're cutting down on the middle mistakes, adjusting properly to different sets and different formations. So I thought they had a good night on Friday. I thought they really played well against us, so we're looking for good things.
Is it easier as a young player to adjust defensively or offensively?
Good question. I think it depends on the kid sometimes and how well they fit into the system. I don't know. That's a good question. I've had players kind of adjust to both. We've had players that I think we felt better putting them on the defensive side certain years. Other times we felt like playing on the offensive line was an easy adjustment if they were surrounded by veteran players. So maybe it's the position, maybe it's the kid. I think it can be lean one way or the other depending on the situation. But I think it's an evaluation you have to make as a coach. Where would this kid's got some talent? Where does he best fit? On which side of the ball, and how can he help us most?
Now you've mentioned only a couple of players that are going to play significant downs on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, we hope that's the case. I mean, we don't have a lot of guys that are penciled in as two-way starters every week, every snap. We just don't have that guy. Now there's a couple of guys that are going to play a lot of snaps, but I don't think anyone that's penciled in as a starter outside of maybe 1 or 2. So hopefully we can get more kids on the field and stay fresh and not have to rely on just a few guys playing both ways.
The schedule is a little different this year, and it starts with week 1. You're not going to Tennessee to play a very good Hayward County team.
Right.
I think they only lost 1 or 2 games last year. You're going up against Mascoutah on the road, and Mascoutah is one of those programs that they kind of fall in that cyclical thing because of the conference they're in with some really good teams every year and year in and year out. They've only won 1 game in the last 2 years, but it was a team that you struggled with at the end of the season in Mattoon. And you probably can really relate to the situation they're in, going from 0-9 to 1-8 and trying to rebuild a program.
Well, and they're on the upward swing. I mean, there's no doubt when you talk to the coaching community and the different people, they feel like Mascoutah's on the rise. They were a young football team last year. They returned several starters. They've got a really good coaching staff, and I think their track program has been outstanding, so they're going to put a fast team on the field. So this is a team on the upward climb, and I think they're on the rise, and I think their community and their school's excited about the future of Mascoutah football. And so you're right, it has been a bit cyclical, I guess, in some ways, but up, down, but I think they feel like they're on their way up, so it'll be a battle for us.
And you talked about the returning players, and I looked at the roster. The quarterback is a junior who I think played a lot as a sophomore.
Right.
Last year,
They returned quite a few kids. You go back and look at the films, and they returned several key players in key spots, and then you add in some young talented players. It ought to be a good ball game.
Week 2 is Dunlap again. This time you go up there, and I looked at their roster today, and a lot of familiar names on that roster too against a team that beat you in overtime last year. Yeah,
they're going to be good. They're always good. They have a really good program, and consistently they're a winner every year. And then week 3 is Highland, who may be a favorite to win the Mississippi Valley, and they're returning a lot of really good players, especially in the skill area. So from what I hear, so we know we got our hands full again in 2017. The schedule's tough. We got a strong conference again, led by Althoff. We've got non-conference games that you could have 3 or 4 playoff teams in it. So It doesn't get any easier this year, but like I said, we got to go out and play the schedule we're given and play hard and get better every week, and hopefully we get off to a good start.
You know, one thing I noticed when I walked in today to do this, you look around the property here, and it's the first time in a long time you're starting the season with no construction.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's a good point. And construction became a way of life around here. So, I mean, it began 5 years ago, and it has been a long process, and we don't complain because that it's in the process of improving the facilities, but we've had to work around and behind and over things and under things and reschedule things and share things, but it's a beautiful facility. We're very blessed to have it, and we never take it for granted. But you're right, it's nice not to have orange construction fence everywhere.
2 weeks on the road and then your first home game. How do you approach these first 3 games of the season?
One game at a time. You know, that coaching cliche never wears out, and it's so true. We got to focus completely on Mascoutah. We need to be 1-0. It's an important ball game, even though it's the first game of the year. It's not a make or break the season game, but I think last year starting 0-3, we really dug a hole. And as you know, beginning week 4, it was playoffs all the way to the end. And we left ourselves very little room for error. So we don't want to start off digging ourselves a hole again. We want to make sure we get out of the gate fast, get some confidence, keep getting better, and take on this tough schedule and become a better football team because of it.
And you talked about that game, that first game, and you were mentioning last week that it's been a while since Marion's won a season opener.
It has been since 2012. You know, and we've played some really good teams. Week 1, we played the Champaign Central team 2 years where they had their best teams in years. We played Haywood County, as you mentioned, had their best team in years. We facing a Granite City team a few years ago that was very strong that year, and now a Mascoutah team that's on the rise. So it just, like I said, it's gotten to the point where our kids are accustomed to playing tough people. We travel, we do what we got to do. It's a matter of just taking care of business.
All right, that's Marion head football coach Kerry Martin. They play Friday night at Mascoutah. It's less than a 2-hour drive, so hop in the car and head up there, right?
Absolutely.
For Dateline Marion, I'm Tim Petrowich.